Tiziana. I'm the founder of the Greater Prince William Climate Action Network and a community organizer for Mothers Out Front. We welcome you tonight to this wonderful event we're really excited about. But first of all, we would like to acknowledge some special people here. We have Delegate Danica Rome over here. And Delegate Lee Carter over there. Candidate Rahim Sheikh. Oh, sorry, you were right. And candidate Andrea Bailey over there. Am I missing anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you so much for coming here. This just goes to show that you are eager to learn more about this important issue, so we appreciate you. I also now would like to give a word to Kelsey Crane from Sierra Club, so thank you.
You have to go there. I'm Kelsey Crane. I'm with Sierra Club Virginia chapter. Tiziana and I put this event together to just introduce people to the Green New Deal, bring people together to talk about all of the momentum that's building, what it means for Virginia, what it means for rural communities, what it means to uplift communities that have been historically disadvantaged, or really bringing together all of the ideas of social, economic, and environmental justice. So I want to thank all of the partner groups who helped support this event and help promote this event. It would not have happened without all of your support. Thank you to all the volunteers who helped set up tonight. Really appreciate everyone who showed up early. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Anthony Flaccavento walk through a presentation on the Green New Deal Virginia. I'm going to talk a little bit about solar energy and what we can do to have more customer-owned solar in Virginia, and then we'll have a lot of time for discussion and Q&A. But first I want to introduce Karen Campblin, who is the co-chair of the Green New Deal Virginia and many other things. Involved with NAACP, Sierra Club, many Fairfax environmental initiatives, lots of different things. Couple housekeeping things. Bathrooms are through this door. If we need additional chairs, anyone doesn't have a seat, let me know. We've got more chairs. Any other needs, just feel free to let me know. But please welcome Karen Campblin to talk a little bit about Green New Deal Virginia.
Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Karen Campblin. I'm the Virginia State Conference NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Chair, as well as the co-chair for the Green New Deal Virginia. Before I introduce Anthony, I just wanted to talk a little bit and give you some day-to-day operations information about Green New Deal Virginia. As you know, we started this movement in January, and we have been going out and meeting with as many people as we want to. I don't want to get into too much about Green New Deal Virginia. I want to save that for Anthony's presentation. But I just want to let you know that we're working with over 50 or 60 different community organization groups, unions. We're working with social justice leaders, environmentalists, teachers, students. We're also working with the Sunrise Movement as well. We're trying to keep in contact with them, and Kelsey Crane has been amazing making sure that link is kept. So we're touching as many people as we can and trying to continue to build our coalition. In April 27th of this year, we met in Richmond, and we had over 100 people at this event. And what that event was to do was to talk about the Green New Deal and kind of set the foundation of what we were going to do. The goal of the Green New Deal Virginia movement right now is coalition building and developing a legislative platform for 2020. So while we were at the Green New Deal, we talked about all of the different climate change, social justice, economic, and job-related issues that are impacting everyone within the Commonwealth. And we started prioritizing what those issues were. And so, as Anthony will describe, what the Green New Deal Virginia its main goal is to combat climate change and social justice. And so, if you imagine a Venn diagram, you've got your environment, you've got your economy, you've got your social justice. Green New Deal is that shaded area in the middle. And so when we talked at the summit, we identified all of the issues that were intersections with all of those three key themes. And that's what we did. And we also added another major issue that was not really part of the Green New Deal Virginia, which was transportation, as you know, one of the leading, if not the leading, greenhouse gas contributor here in Virginia. So we also broke up into 8 working groups, 8 different policy working groups. So we have different members from all of the different organizations, because what we want to do, another thing that the Green New Deal Virginia wants to make sure that we do is break down those silos. We don't want environmentalists trying to figure it out on their own, social justice figuring it out on their own, and unions figuring it out on their own. Green New Deal has a commonality, and we want to make sure that we hear everything from everyone. So, together, yes?
Shouldn't we also be trying to get something out in time to help the 2019 elections here in Virginia? Because that's even more important.
And I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for that. I like to know that it's wanted. Okay, so while we were at the summit, we came up with 8 working policy groups. And they're looking at, I won't go into all of them, but more democratic governance. How do you make sure that voting, registration, access to the polls, and access to those types of programs are just? Looking at sustainable jobs, social justice and health disparities. Another working group is defossilization and energy efficiency, healthier sustainable rural communities, healthier air, land, and water, sustainable cities and transportation, and then our 9th working group, which is not necessarily policy related, is our outreach and education committee. And this is the one that's really going to kick in towards the ending of this process. So around August, what we're going to do is we're going to send out a survey. Our working groups are identifying the issues and coming up with a description of what the legislative packet is supposed to look like. And then in August, we're going to do a survey, and we're going to find out what the top ones are, and that's what we're going to base our foundation on. And we hope to launch what our 2020 legislative packet is going to be in September of 2019. That is going to give us enough time to go out and talk to the candidates, talk to the decision makers, talk to all of the different organizations, and make sure that we mobilize and we're ready for January 2020. So that is in the works. Yes, thank you. So with that, I just wanted to make sure, I also wanted to do a call out to Paula Clemens, who's in the back. Paula is the chair of our Outreach and Education Committee. Now, that committee is going to be coming online in full force within the next couple weeks, because she also has to sign, thank you, she has to sign up, so please join us. It is very important for, once we get everything ready for the 2020 legislation, the General Assembly, it is very important that we have everybody behind us, because we need people to show up in Richmond to show support. We need people to do petitions, letter to editors, and anything else innovative and out of the box that can help us push Green New Deal Virginia forward. So I think with that, I am going to now talk about Anthony. So I got an email, it was a really bad day, and I got an email from Kelsey and Tiziana, and they said, would you like to introduce Anthony? And I said, oh my goodness, yes. I first met Anthony working with the Green New Deal Virginia and talking with him for about 10 minutes. It was just easy to see the passion, the knowledge, and just the expertise that Anthony has on everything related to the Commonwealth, and everything related to rural, and anything related to agriculture. And I said, wow, this is great. And after I met him, I went online and I Googled him, and I went, whoa, was I right? And he's just so humble and modest. I enjoy working with Anthony. And Anthony's been helping us try to develop the message and trying to make sure we stay on track and stay focused with anything. As you know, Anthony ran for office in the District 9. He's the author of 2 amazing books that looked at, policy as well as the environment to come up with real-life practical solutions. And that's what he's bringing to the Green New Deal Virginia team. And so with that, I would like to, I'm so honored to be able to be here to introduce Anthony Flaccavento.
Thank you, Karen. I'm embarrassed that you're honored, but I'm grateful nevertheless. Thanks a lot to Kelsey and Tiziana for organizing this. It's great to have Danica and Lee here. I'm just thrilled. That's an extra bonus being up in this part of the world, and actually several people that I met either during my campaign or various kind of progressive functions over the years. So I'm going to run through this, and what you'll see is that this presentation, which is certainly not the only tool we're going to use, but right now it's kind of our main tool to communicate about the Green New Deal. I've been the driver with it, but with lots of additions, lots of modifications, lots of input from the whole team of people that are involved with the Green New Deal. It does have a focus on trying to present it in a way that's really gonna connect to people who are not already in the choir. So hopefully you'll get that sense as you go along. So the Green New Deal. Essentially in the next 20 to 25 minutes, we'll talk, thanks, that's perfect. We'll talk about why we need it, do we need it, and if so, why? What are the main goals or planks, we're calling them now, who's gonna benefit, and at the end, what you can do, which will come out in the Q&A particularly. So we've got some serious problems. You know, we have a low unemployment rate in Virginia and nationally for sure, but that masks tremendous problems of inequality, massive inequality that is only getting worse, all kinds of economic, class, and racial injustice, and a lot of problems related to the ecosystem. First and foremost, climate change, but many others as well. So how did we get here? And why do we need something as ambitious and as comprehensive as the Green New Deal? So this graph looks at the change in the US population between 1980, the year of Ronald Reagan's election, it was first term, and 2016, basically today. And we grew from 230 million people to 320 million people, a modest amount of growth, a little over 40%. During that exact same period of time, the economy increased in size by this amount. Now look at that again. Between 1980 and the present, the population grew by 43%. The economy, after adjusting for inflation, grew by almost threefold, dramatically more. Now what that means when we say the economy grew, because we always talk about the gross domestic product and is the economy growing and is it growing fast enough, and Democrats and Republicans alike are always talking about grow the economy, that's their main issue. What that means when we say the economy is 3 times bigger compared to 1980, it means 3 times more business transactions, 3 times more goods and services being produced and purchased in the marketplace, 3 times more cash in one form or another, money moving through the economy. Population grew this much, the economy grew this much. So the big question is, why aren't most of us much better off? Because there's a whole lot more money per capita in the country today compared to 1980. We should all be dramatically better off. In fact, most of us are at treading water or have gone backwards. Well, we know the biggest reason, of course, is because most of that increase in economic activity, most of that money made has concentrated in the top. It continued to concentrate in the top during the Clinton years and the Obama years, I hate to tell you. It's just the Republicans are unabashed about their desire to concentrate it in the top and how that's such a good thing. But it happens through Democrat and Republican alike. And of course, the 2017 tax plan only made it far, far worse. Another huge factor in how this has happened is the long-term decline of unions. From nearly a third of all workers in the economy back at the economic heyday in the 50s to now about 6 or 7% in the private sector, about 11% overall. With the decline in unions goes the decline in bargaining power of workers, goes the concentration of wealth, goes the 300 to 1 CEO to worker pay raise. So we talk a lot about trickle-down economics, and if anything's trickled down, it's missed rural America, it's missed communities of color, and you could say it's missed most everyday Americans. The disparities, of course, are concentrated both by place, like in some of our poorest rural and urban communities, and by color, with the wealth disparity being 20-fold between black and white families. Now that's not something that's just happened in the last 40 years, but it's gotten worse. And that impact, that race and class impact, is not only a question of lower income, lower earning, lower accumulated wealth, but it's also who gets to choose what happens in their community. And so that when communities like Union Hill try to stand up to keep a compressor to move gas through a pipeline up, they're up against a big battle, as are poor rural white communities and Native American communities along those pipeline routes. So that's one set of problems. We've got this economy based on growth and trickle-down economics, and it ain't trickling down. It's going up. It's being sucked up. Another is this problem of economic externalities, that so much economic activity, we don't pay the real cost for it. So when we flip our switch to get our electric power, this is part of the side impact of that, mountaintop removal in Southwest Virginia and all over the country, as well as the right now extreme rate of black lung. Even though the number of miners, coal miners, is a tiny fraction of what it was, the percentage of them that have advanced black lung is through the roof now. 30, almost 40 years after black lung protective legislation was supposedly passed. And then, of course, you have the problem of climate change, which we'll talk about in great detail here. I know this group, I don't need to go into much detail about it. You know that not only is the United Nations panel telling us how dire it is, but our own government is telling us, our own federal assessment last year told us just how dire the situation is. One of the reasons for that is that, for the most part, economic growth, when we have a so-called healthy economy, which we don't, but when we have a growing economy, our emissions go up as well. And there's no reason why we can't de-link economic prosperity from environmental impact. But right now, when the economy grows, so do our emissions. So this trickle-down economy, it's concentrated wealth, it's perpetuated injustice rather than lifting boats, and it's pitted environmentalists and progressives, people like those of us in this room, probably most of us, against people in the countryside. We've been part of that, is my critique. We've enabled that. We've exacerbated that. But it's also been the very heavily invested and carefully crafted message of Fox News and Breitbart and the Republican Party and conservative leadership. But right now, we're in this very ironic and terrible situation where the people who live closest to the ecosystem, farmers like myself, loggers who work in the woods, and even professional foresters, fishermen and women, those folks who depend on the ecosystem in a much more intimate and everyday way than most of us here do, hate environmentalists. A lot of them, a high percentage, hate environmentalists. So something is fundamentally wrong that we've gotten to that point. So we believe between the failure, the abject failure of trickle-down, the perpetuation of injustice and the concentration of wealth, and the ecological collateral damage of this economy, it's time for a Green New Deal. And it's green in the sense that it fits within the ecosystem, and by that we mean both locally, our rivers, our landscape, our forests, our water, as well as the biosphere as a whole. And it's a new deal because we're saying whatever tweaking and tinkering and whatever else we've done up to this point, it has not generated the kind of real prosperity that would help people. So now we're going to look at the 4 planks of the Green New Deal. Now this could change, and Karen is more up to speed on this, but when Sam Rasool first introduced this legislation in just this past January, in the 2019 session, he put together a resolution that had 4 planks, and that's still what we're working from. Again, as Karen said, there's 8 working groups, so this could evolve. And the first one is that we need the Green New Deal to foster a just and equitable transition to 100% renewables. So 100% renewables is key. 2030 was the goal set forth. But the co-equal with that key is that we get there not on the backs of workers, but by lifting up workers. And workers who've been left out, workers who will be dispossessed in coal country, and those who are doing fracking now, we got to be able to do it in a way that lifts up workers. We're encouraged because what we see in green jobs generally is that they tend to pay better and they tend to have a higher rate of unionization. So we think we can get there. How do we do it? So here's where my bottom-up lens comes in. I'm always looking for examples that exemplify. Well, here's an example from across the country in Bellingham, Washington, where they were doing a Habitat for Humanity community, 30 homes, low to moderate income, very affordable, And on top of the usual habitat standards of a safe, warm, dry home, they put solar panels on the roofs of every home to bring down the electric bills and to make those families more self-sufficient. We're even beginning to see solar panels going on old strip mines. Now, in Southwest Virginia, the first funding for that has just been secured. This example is from Eastern Kentucky, but it looks like we'll be able to get it in Southwest Virginia soon. I've been reading about this. You all would know much more than I, but I understand that the biggest solar farm in the region is going to be going up, maybe online by next spring in Oaksville, on a farm property that was donated by the owner. It's going to be enough electricity to take care of about 3,300 homes, as I understand it. We're seeing it also in energy efficiency. Now, that's a very key part of the Green New Deal, because energy efficiency is the low-hanging fruit. It's the easiest way to get emissions reduction, cost savings, and reduced environmental impact overall. Now, on the other side, they're talking about this goal of getting all of our old building stock, homes, community buildings, churches, weatherized, winterized, and up to speed on energy efficiency is elitist. How is that elitist to save people money on their electric bill? I don't know. But here's an example you can give, comes from southeastern Kentucky. These folks are weatherizing people's homes, putting in new windows, bringing down their electric bill, their heating and cooling dramatically. And then the low-income and working families that are getting these services they're not getting it as a grant, they're paying back through the savings on their utility bill. So if they were averaging $300 a month to heat and cool their home, and it was never really warm in the winter because they're old and drafty, after the new windows, the insulation, and everything else is done, then they take some of that savings and they pay off that bill and they get to keep the rest. It's a win-win. We're seeing it in terms of the expanded, and I'm no fan of Dominion, but Dominion continues to assert that they're planning to do a substantial amount of offshore wind.
Do you believe that?
I know.
I don't, let's say I'm agnostic.
They bought out the rights and not gonna do a damn thing.
Well, that's what a lot of people fear, but there has been some movement forward on it. So I was with you there, but I have seen some developments. On the flip of that, of course, the president's submitted 2020 budget cut the budget for renewables and energy efficiency almost by 3/4. So that's a little bit about that idea of a just transition. The second plank is about investment, direct, large-scale investment in job training programs, in renewables and energy efficiency, and a smart grid, and everything else. And lots of groups have studied this. McKinsey, when they studied this, said that if we did a comprehensive effort to really, really bring our building stock up to the kind of energy efficiency we could do, we would save $1 trillion by 2030. It's a little bit like the healthcare debate. Do you want to keep paying through the leakage of so much money being spent on heating and cooling bills over time, or do you want to pay now to save money over the long haul? And McKinsey found that we'd save $1 trillion. Now, a lot of that money is going to be public money. We'd like to see Virginia, as well as the federal government, put money in, but it can absolutely be private money, like what we saw the example in Kentucky with the small scale. But be careful with some of these private investors, because this long statement is a little excerpt from a statement that the 5 big Wall Street banks made about how, as you see, they were going to recognize the problem of climate change and they were going to invest in the alternatives. That's what they said in 2016. That they, as institutions, were committed to funding the solutions. Between then and now, they've put $1.8 trillion more into fossil fuel investment. So if we're going to get private investment, we better hold people accountable. What would that look like? Well, one big portion of it is training workers for these new jobs. And one example comes from Buffalo. One of the poorest neighborhoods in Buffalo has been engaged for a good long time. You know what? I'm going to turn this off. One of the poorest neighborhoods in Buffalo has been engaged in an effort to completely revitalize the community. And they've been doing it by providing top quality training programs for people who have been out of work, people who have served time in jail and have come back to the community. And what they've found is they've been able to create living wage, what they call high road jobs. This is some of the folks doing it. But the work that they're doing is specific to their community. Those men and women are now turning around, rehabbing old homes that were vacant, making old vacant lots into community gardens and urban parks.
They've been building ecological features to deal with stormwater runoff, and they've trained over 100 people and are employing people throughout West Buffalo. So that's the kind of job training.
Who pays them?
Well, that's usually contract work. So if they're doing rehab, let's say of an old building, it's either a private investor that has it, or it's the city of Buffalo. Similar thing happening in southern West Virginia with the Coalfield Development Corporation. They have a training program for laid off miners, and the unique features, because there's all kinds of job training, are twofold. One is that it's 40 hours a week of training for 6 months. 33 of it is on-the-job training in existing businesses. The other 6 is classroom. So it's real in-depth and hands-on. The other feature is they're not just training people in generic skills, they're training them for 4 emerging occupations in southern West Virginia. Solar installation is one, mountaintop farming is the second, third is construction, and the fourth is deconstruction, taking down old buildings, salvaging and reutilizing the materials. They're putting everybody that goes through their training is getting a good job at the end so far. So we know that this whole investment in energy efficiency not only is going to cut our emissions, cut our fuel bills, but it puts people to work. All kinds of estimates put between 500,000 and 1 million jobs if we make a commitment to energy efficient building stock. Not only that, but most of the businesses that do that energy efficient work are small businesses. And most of the materials that are used in making buildings more energy efficient are made in the US. So it's a win-win-win-win all the way around an investment in the building stock. This second plank is going to take big investment in things like high-speed rail in the urban corridors and low-speed rail on places like I-81, and it's also going to mean investment in innovative businesses like Acme Panel in Radford, where they're building super insulated building panels for homes, for buildings, for community centers, in which they cut the they cut the utility use in half when you build with this. This is an existing business. We should be able to see through the Green New Deal big investments in big public projects and small investments in these kinds of innovative businesses. Third goal is the absolute priority of clean air and clean water for all Virginians. Whatever the economic strategy, we cannot get away from that because we know the disaster on health and the economy when we allow our water to be contaminated. Now, some of that's a matter of old infrastructure in small towns and big cities with contaminated water. Some of it's new threats like the pipelines that we need to be able to fight off. When we have clean water, we get not only healthier people, but we also create economic opportunities. The folks who've been working on the Elizabeth River cleanup for 3 decades now, and they're beginning to see the fruits of their labor, they're also seeing a return of some of the species, some of the edible, harvestable species that used to be part of the Elizabeth River ecosystem that you couldn't touch for a long time. And down in Southwest Virginia, in the little town of St. Paul, that's an image of the Clinch River there, St. Paul, an old coal town, has made the Clinch River and its preservation as the most biodiverse river in the United States the centerpiece of their economic development strategy. So they've gone from extracting coal as the basis for their economy to now restoring the Clinch River as the essence of their economic strategy going forward. We're not that far from the coast here, a lot closer than when I started out this morning, but this fella, Bren Smith, is another pioneer in fisheries, and I would love to see him come down the coast a little bit. Bren, who I've met a couple of times, he quit high school at 15. He was a commercial fisherman all across the East Coast and the West Coast up into Canada. He was part of the depletion of many fisheries, and he realized at some point in his early 40s this wasn't working out too well, not for him, not for the marine ecosystem. Bren has created this amazing system he calls vertical ocean farming that uses different species of seaweed and seagrass to clean up the local marine ecosystem, and then through vertical columns he raises clams, mussels, oysters, and scallops. They're super clean. He gets a premium price for them, and that seaweed that he's using to clean it up, it sequesters phenomenal amounts of carbon. Then it's harvested and it's dried and ground up and used as either a human or animal high-density nutrient supplement. Amazing system, amazing. It's what Wendell Berry calls solving for pattern. And Bren is teaching fishermen who are tired of the old routine up and down the East Coast. We need to get them in Virginia. Last plank of the Green New Deal is near and dear to my heart. It's investments in small-scale, local, sustainable agriculture. Hemp This gentleman is one of the leading hemp farmers in the state. The jury's still out on hemp in terms of how it's going to work for small farmers, but clearly it's a valuable, useful crop, relatively low input, could be part of rural revitalization in a lot of places without a lot of ecological impact. One thing that is so important for those of us in towns and cities is to remember that agriculture typically, when we talk climate change, and if we're in a group of environmentalists, agriculture is on the bad list. It's on the bad list as contributing to the emissions problem. And certainly it does, as it's practiced a lot. But I'm here to tell you that the right kind of farming, whether it's rotational grazing with many different species of animals on pasture, whether it's organic fruits and vegetables in a low-till operation like I do, whether it's grains, it not only produces healthier foods, meats, dairy, and other things, but it actually pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and puts it in the ground. You know, we all know we have way too much carbon in the atmosphere. That's the essence of climate change. What a lot of people don't know is that over the last century, we've given up between 50 and 70% of our soil carbon. So our soils are carbon starved, and the right kind of farming practice pull it out of the atmosphere and put it in the ground. This is a little picture from my farm, using cover crops to serve that function. To do that, we have to be able to create the infrastructure that allows farmers to make a living doing that. So in our food and agriculture working group, we're talking about it. And one of the areas we hope the Green New Deal will do is investment in local foods infrastructure, because that helps people eat better, but it also helps create better paying markets for farmers who are using these sustainable practices. And it isn't just farms, because more than 3 to 1 in Virginia are forests to farmland. Forests are absolutely critical. We're lucky we have forests that self-generate if you treat them properly. We worked in Southwest Virginia to create a vertically integrated flooring business. And the two gals there, Jennifer and Sherry Wagner, that's their forest in Meadowview, Virginia, after we had completed our sustainable timber harvest. You could barely tell anything had happened. The wood that came out of their forest and some others was made into hardwood flooring at a plant we built in Castlewood, and then that's a picture from the Bristol Public Library. That idea that doing the right thing on farms and in forests doesn't have to mean just don't do anything. It can mean do the right thing, create market incentives to help people do that. So who benefits? Those are the 4 planks. Who do we think will benefit? First of all, people. As we've seen already, the potential for not just jobs, but better paying jobs, jobs more likely to be union, is very high. The impacts for small businesses, whether they're doing energy retrofits, solar installation, sustainable farming, are really there. And most of all, we've got to make sure that the Green New Deal contributes not only to good jobs and better paying jobs, but that it helps create economic diversity that increases the resilience of communities. Because when you hear the critique of the Green New Deal, it starts off with its socialism, right? And then if the critique's coming from a Democrat, it's usually that it's just too expensive, or it's big government. You know, we just can't afford it. It's a nice idea, but it's pie in the sky. But in fact, there's every reason to think that the Green New Deal done right will contribute to community self-reliance and community resilience, which saves money in every respect we can think. So when you hear about it being an unaffordable pipe dream, fight back against that, because every study says that ultimately the nation will be saving money, individuals will be saving money on their fuel bills, on their gas bills for their vehicles, on their home heating bills, and so much so that even these 2 conservative groups, the Conservative Energy Network and the Center for Responsible Energy Solutions, 2/3 and 3/4 of the folks there, conservatives, self-described conservatives, say they want more federal government action for clean energy. So let's build a Green New Deal that helps people help themselves. Now, I don't think the Green New Deal is by itself going to be investing in community gardens, but when we start focusing on community resilience and community self-reliance, things like community gardens in small towns just will be part of this rebuilding of our community. There'll be investments in urban ag as well as in rural ag. And this fellow, Will Allen, who's got the net there, is a brilliant gentleman from Milwaukee who's created this integrated system of raising fish, vegetables, and everything in a small space, what he calls aquaponics, that absolutely is phenomenally productive and very good. Now, as we move forward with solar, the other thing we want to see in the Green New Deal is changing the the legislative climate in Virginia so that we can have community solar. Because right now, if you want to have several families, as they've done here, go in on building a community solar farm, Virginia is going to treat you as though you're a utility, which makes it impossible. We need to change the legislation because community solar allows people to buy in at all levels. You don't have to be a homeowner. You could be a renter who can only afford to pay for 1 or 2 panels, but you can be part of your community's movement towards clean energy. Same thing goes for our transportation system. We have a working group working on that, not only about the mass transit that we talked about earlier, but it's encouraging to know that Richmond has committed to bike lanes. And one other thing that we really, really will be pushing for, I believe, throughout all of this is, again, good jobs, yes, jobs that reward small businesses and family farmers and sustainable enterprises, but also pushing towards more worker ownership. Worker ownership, along with unions, those two might be the single most important steps we could take to create real economic justice. Because in worker-owned businesses, people get paid better. When there's a downturn or an economic crisis, they respond by sharing the pain rather than letting people go. The money circulates within the workers rather than going to the boss. It's a tremendously important thing to do. I'm going to just wind up here because I want to get to the conversations. But I want to say a couple of other things. So as we think about this, so I've been very involved in the local economy movement, local farm and food movement for a long time. And just a few points I want to say. Because again, a lot of this is going to come down to a question of money. People are going to say, how are you going to pay for this? And over, we have to make the argument that this will pay for itself. One way it does is when you invest in what I've come to call community capital. There's many kinds of community capital. One form of it is a farmer's market. You get tremendous bang for your buck. This is an image from the Abingdon Farmers Market, where I am in Southwest Virginia. Abingdon's a town of 8,000 people. We started in a parking lot. After 3 or 4 years of building up our market, the town let us move to a better parking lot. After another 3 or 4 years of building the market, the town built this pavilion. This pavilion now is home for 50 farmers every Tuesday afternoon and every Saturday morning. We get between 1,200 and 2,000 customers come through on a Saturday morning. Not only that, on Thursday nights, it's the site for the Thursday night jams that brings people together from all over. All of that is community capital. It's revitalizing the community. It's a small amount of money spent as opposed to every one of those farmers. And it's also incubating new businesses like Nicole Dyer's White Birch Cafe, where she started making these all local breakfast sandwiches and high energy juice at the farmer's market. And after building her business and her customer base, she now has a very successful restaurant, just like Wolf Natural Elms has a very successful farm supply. This incubation is a critical thing we should be looking for. How do we build that capacity? Another point is about paying now versus paying later. Do you know that the fast food companies spend a little over $4 billion a year to market their products to us, right? Did you know that that's a tax write-off for them? The way our tax system works, you can write off marketing and promotional expenses. So what that means is that we, as taxpayers, are subsidizing McDonald's and everybody else to convince us to buy their supersized portions of food. And then we're turning around and spending a fraction of that $4 billion to try to convince Americans to eat better and eat healthier. Something is wrong with that. What's happening here, this image, is one of a new phenomenon within the local food movement of mobile markets, of taking healthy local food, produce, meats, dairy, to lower income communities. Now that's a little more expensive in the short term, but think about the money we would save if we had more of those mobile markets and less fast food promotion. So I'm going to just wrap it up there and just say this, that what I most like about the Green New Deal, it's driven by climate change. It's driven by the utter urgency of climate change. But it is first and foremost, in my mind, it's an economic strategy, more so than an environmental strategy. It's a recognition that the way we've been going about creating economic prosperity hasn't worked. And that we want to redo that so that ultimately people, communities, and the ecosystem are not collateral damage of economic prosperity or economic development, but they are actually built into the system, baked into the system, so that the economy promotes health, the economy sustains the land and the environment and the economy, helps rekindle community resilience and self-reliance. That's what we think the Green New Deal can do. That's what we think it will do. That's it. Thanks. We'll do a little discussion Q&A after Kelsey's.
Yeah, sorry. I know y'all have some burning questions, but I asked you to hold it for like 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you, Anthony. That was fantastic. Okay, cool. I can talk louder too. Okay. Cool, microphone. Sweet, so thank you all again for being here. I neglected before to thank Bull Run UU for hosting us. Let's see if
Let me see if there is. Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me see
Yeah.
if there's ways to fix it. You can start projecting.
Okay, cool. So Anthony mentioned changing solar policies, and that is a huge thing that we need to do here in Virginia. I am going to get into a little bit of where we are with solar policy and why we need to drastically change it. Cool. So Sierra Club, we're working on a campaign called More Solar, More Places, and that campaign is working to bring more community solar, what's called distributed solar, to residents in Virginia. And why are we working on that? We need our future to be clean, renewable energy. Over 120 cities that represent, I think, about a third of the population or half of the U.S. population have committed to 100% clean energy for all people. There's 2 little dots on the map here for Virginia. So I was saying we need to commit to 100% clean energy. We've got 120 cities who have already done that. The 2 cities in Virginia are Blacksburg County and Floyd County. In 2017, they both made commitments to 100% clean energy. So Arlington is, I think they've got a new clean energy plan coming out. Alexandria is working on, Fairfax is working on one, Albemarle County is working on one, but where we have active commitments is Blacksburg and Floyd. So we need to create that clean, renewable energy economy, and we need to really clearly define what we need by clean, renewable, and the actions that are going to help shift us are going to create millions of good jobs. But in May, for those of us who check out what Dominion's saying once in a while, they said on their social media that 85% of their generation comes from clean energy sources, and it's so important. And if you look at their actual energy mix, that is because they think that natural gas and nuclear energy are clean sources. So it's really important that we hold them accountable to that statement, and then when they say clean energy sources, they're talking about wind, solar, geothermal, other things that are clean, safe, renewable. While nuclear energy might not generate carbon emissions, it is not a safe form of energy, and we know what fracked gas is doing to our communities already. So in the last couple of years, we've definitely made some progress on what's called utility scale solar farms. But this is our solar report card from a website called Solar Power Rocks. They rank every state, and that's the little wheel in the middle here. And this year, we've gotten a D minus, sometimes we've gotten an F. Overall, we got a C, but if you can see in the box, there's 5 areas where we failed on solar policy. A lot of those are our renewable portfolio standard, our rebates, our incentives, and having solar accessibility. So we're talking about distributed solar, and you can see from the graphic before, even the industry folks are being critical of what we're seeing in Virginia. So large-scale solar farms, usually owned by a utility, they produce the energy, they set a rate, they sell it to us, we have clean energy. The other option is we produce our own energy, which is better in a lot of ways. We need both. But we've seen progress in the last few years on that large-scale solar. We need to see the kind of policies that allow for more customer-owned solar, not just homeowners. A lot of benefits that come with that. I think a lot of you already know a lot of these, but it's clean. It is going to be a big factor in meeting our climate goals. It's cheap. It's important that we are looking at the most cost-effective options for producing our energy. It's a good investment. There's a lot of other things that benefit us in terms of if we have natural disasters, we potentially have a more resilient grid. It's good for local governments, it's good for business, it's good for residents. But we have a lot of obstacles that are limiting our access to solar energy right now. That makeup of different policies that you saw on that scorecard on that wheel, we are really lagging behind, and we've only made progress on the big utility scales. What this does is it keeps the business's usual model, allows Dominion to decide what kind of energy we're using and how much we're paying for it, and in the end it hurts residents, it hurts businesses, it hurts our local governments, and we have really good models in other states for addressing those barriers. So what are we facing? Here we go. So I'm going to get into some more walky technical things that we're going to eventually put into legislation, but I like to talk about these things because I want to have all the information when I talk to my decision makers, especially elected officials, so I would like you all to as well. So what we are seeing in terms of some of the barriers that we're facing in Virginia is a 1% cap on net metering. Net metering is when you produce more, your solar panels produce more energy than you need, you sell it back to the utility company, they give you a credit. So then usually in the winter, you're producing more than you need. In the summer, you're using more energy, you have the ability to offset your bills without net metering. So right now where it stands is when 1% of our energy in Virginia is solar, the net metering will end, and any customers who sign on beyond that 1%, they'll have solar, but they won't have net metering, which means that they'll be producing energy for free. They won't be able to make that money back, and then you also pay for energy from the grid that you could have offset. So it's really a key thing for customers to have net metering available to them. We also have a limit on the size that you can build of your solar array. It's a 10 kilowatt system cap, and then if you have a system larger than that, they charge you $60 a month. Other states have RECs, what are called renewable energy credits. They have them in DC and Maryland. Folks who have solar energy on their homes, they get money back from the utility for having that solar energy. You can look on some websites on what the current rate is for those renewable energy credits, those RECs in Maryland, but we have very minimal RECs in Virginia, if any. So that size limit applies to residential projects, and then commercial projects can't build larger than 1 megawatt. There are also some things that make it difficult for folks who are not homeowners, as well as homeowners, but power purchase agreements is a financing mechanism for solar. A company purchases the solar panels, installs them for you, and you essentially rent them from the company. It's a really good way to make solar panels affordable. They pay for the upfront cost, and then they take a tax credit and they pass the savings on to the customers. So right now we have 50 kilowatt minimum for power purchase agreements, and those are only for universities, private businesses, nonprofits cannot use them, so there's really arbitrary restrictions. And then the other big factor that we're seeing is something that prevents meter aggregation. Meter aggregation means that multiple people are using the same meter for their solar. So a developer, a home who owns condos, apartment buildings, can invest in solar, can build a solar farm, but then cannot have multiple people connected to that same solar array. It's called meter aggregation. So there's actually a law, you cannot combine multiple meters from the same consumer on the same property, which makes it almost impossible for people who want to build environmentally friendly apartment complexes to do so, and it makes it almost impossible for folks who rent to have access to solar. So we are looking to bring solar freedom to Virginia, and the Sierra Club, along with a lot of other organizations, worked last year to put in a comprehensive bill that tackled all these barriers. It did not make it through, but we're gonna come back again this year. All of these barriers have nothing to do with technical limits, and they are hurting the solar industry. It's holding back millions of dollars in revenue and holding back thousands of career jobs for Virginians. So what we are getting people educated and empowered and prepared to advocate for are removing these barriers, removing net metering, allowing for power purchase agreements, removing the barriers on installation size, remove the standby charge, and instead offer renewable energy credits. And then what do we need instead of that? We need to allow for meter aggregation, we need to create more incentives, and we need to foster the financial incentives and the programs in Virginia that we're seeing in neighboring states, and that will unleash a huge amount of solar potential for Virginia, make all of our electricity cheaper, and put us on the right path to having clean energy. The biggest piece of having more solar, we don't need fossil fuels. The more solar we have, the less we need fossil fuels, and all of the impacts that come along with that, not only climate change, but the impacts that we see of extraction to different communities, to our water, to rural areas. If you think Appalachia has been drained of resources, and executives and different companies have gotten really rich off of that, and it is one of the poorest areas in America, that does not make any sense. But if we have the opportunity to transition those areas and our state to a renewable energy-based economy, to have solar, we are going in the right direction, and we will unleash so many benefits for people in Virginia. So thank you for letting me talk about that for a few minutes. I'm happy to take some questions, but I imagine most of your questions are for Anthony about what we're doing with the Green New Deal. But thank you. Oh yeah, we've got a petition. So sign that petition, and that's my email. And then reach out if you have any questions. But yeah, so thank y'all.
There are a lot of legislators who just sort of, especially if the governor is in their party, they say, oh, well, this bill is on the governor's agenda. Let's just go ahead and vote for it without much discussion. So I would encourage you, when you're talking to your delegates and senators, push them to take a more active role to actually take back legislative authority, because we are a co-equal branch of government. And I'm telling you, out of the 140 people in the General Assembly, there's probably only about 20 of us that realize that. So please remind your delegates and senators that we are a co-equal branch of government. We are the ones who set the agenda, and it's up to the other two branches to figure out how to do it.
One word about, we talk a lot about framing. One word about framing, I'd say. So we don't know exactly what's going to come out of the working groups. I think what we're looking for is specifics and practical, based on examples, and implementable. I would just say that while I totally understand the need for a master plan in Sean Hannity's hands becomes a 5-year plan, and pretty soon we're talking about Stalin. So we've got to, seriously, we have to be, through this process, we have to be able to reach people who are not already in the choir. That includes farmers, it includes rural people, and we have to be careful about our framing, the phrases we use.
So, Anthony, from firsthand experience, if you're to the left of Barry Goldwater, they're going to call you Joseph Stalin anyway.
No, that's true.
I didn't realize how literal that was going to be. My opponent in 2017 sent a mailer to 11,000 homes with Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and me on it, talking about the healthcare plan. So, but yeah, I just wanted to point out that we need to advocate for doing the right thing, and sort of make the politics come after that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Is the label Green New Deal already too toxic? Do we need a new name for it?
Well, it's like progressivism and stuff. I don't think we can change it at this point. I think we have to defend it and say it's going to be good for people and good for communities.
We have to explain it.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do, for sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
Obviously, the energy change is really tremendous, and that's pretty cool. And new groups pop up, and then they get their winning. And I am really looking in Virginia for sustainability as well as resilience. And so the question then becomes is where's the connection with Virginia Conservation Network, so that when we go down to Richmond, we're not just going down as New Green Deal, or not just, and I know Sierra Club intersects with both of those groups. The NAACP this last time had a fabulous legislative session, and I'm a member of the NAACP, and I was never so pleased in all my life to find out the number one ask was clean energy. I guess what I'm really saying is take this energy, but also to utilize it, because Virginia Conservation Network it's been since 1969, and they're second to none on environmental issues. And they do clean water, they're talking about sustainable green communities, and so I'm not on the board. I'm just saying, where's the energy to intersect multiple different groups and then say, okay, we're gonna have an environmental legislative day, January the 20th, for instance, or maybe not Martin Luther King Day, but January something or other, so that we're all there and we can go into legislative offices and have 100 people there rather than 3.
Yeah, that's definitely what we want to do, and that's what we're working towards. Right now, we've got about 50 or 60 different community groups.
I see that.
And
It's
but
great.
VCN is not a part of it yet.
I see that, that's what
Because
concerns
they
me.
have their own platform. So food, like for instance, Food and Water, I'm just gonna name something. Food and Water Watch, or NAACP. I'll take me for example. We're part of the Green New Deal, but I also have an NAACP platform that is not 100% Green New Deal. We overlap. So we were worried that if we take the Green New Deal to the bigger groups, minus Sierra Club, but if we take it to the bigger groups, the community might get washed out. And that's what we wanted to avoid. So right now, we're talking to the smaller groups, the disenfranchised communities, the unions, the people who normally don't have this conversation. Normally don't have the conversation on environmental, right? Normally don't have the conversation on economy, and normally don't have the conversation of social justice, and most importantly, don't have it together. And we were afraid that if we have the big groups, we would lose that. So once we figure out what the community wants for Green New Deal, then we're gonna open it up to the decision makers, to the bigger groups.
Yeah.
We're gonna open, it's actually kind of compartmentalized within Sierra Club right now, because I'm part of Sierra Club too. But, so once we're ready to launch in September, then the full part of Sierra Club will become involved in it. NAACP, we're trying to get as many branches involved. But again, we just want to be very cautious that the community voice does not get washed out early in the process.
Yeah.
But they will be a part of it.
Yeah, and they're supportive, and we are very much in coordination. I am on way too many conference calls on a weekly basis, but we do coordinate, and I expect VCN would support and help organize around some of the legislation in terms of being like a formal member of the coalition. That's up to them. If you're a member, you can encourage them that you'd want to see them join formally, but they're in no way not in support. And I think there's a big strength in the Green New Deal coalition that it goes outside the environmental and conservation community. So VCN is still there. They're great. They've got 130 organizations all the way from Sierra Club to Garden Club groups. And there's a lot of power in that, but I think there's a distinct need for coordination beyond the conservation groups in Virginia if we're gonna be successful.
And their personal connections too. I know people within VCN, Kelsey knows what they. So they're still kind of. But right now we're talking to.
Right, a corollary to that,
Turn
and
it
I know
on.
a lot of people need to contribute is, especially in the educational group that you've got, the research done is just, I was just showing Alexis the book, the legislative update in 2019 in terms of VCN and the number of different topic areas they have, and the experts that people can refer to, not to take over, but to refer to. The research they've done is stellar. And there's no reason to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Did we have another question?
And here, and then in the back.
Thank you, Anthony. Two comments. One to the gentleman that was talking about the utility pushing back, saying it cost us money for you solar people. After the Northeast grid collapse in 2003, there were 2 studies done nationally. The utility gets a benefit of approximately $2,700 per kilowatt that we pay for to put in a solar on our roofs. They are not losing money on solar PV. Those are both national studies done by universities that got their stuff together on doing the research. So pushback was that fact. One thing I gotta say, Anthony, on your comment about McDonald's versus the food truck's writing off his expense too. That's a tax deduction for his truck and everything he's doing there too. And that's one of the things, out of fairness,
Most of those are
we gotta be,
nonprofit at this point.
we've gotta be cautious how we present those things, because the people who are not supportive are gonna jump on that and saying, well, yeah, you know, everybody's got a tax deduction. You wanna take away this one, but you don't wanna take this
There's a
one.
difference in whether it's a for-profit or non-profit. Usually you're paying a hell of a lot more. You're getting a whole lot more off, but if it's for profit, then it's for non-profit.
No, I think it's a point
And
well
it's also-
taken.
yeah.
But at this point, the mobile market movement that I'm familiar with is almost entirely nonprofits.
Yeah.
It's not food trucks in the
Everything
business
else
sense.
here that I've seen is for profit.
But you're talking about
On
food trucks. This is
yeah,
different. This is
everything
mobile
okay.
markets of people taking a
Yeah.
grocery store to a low-income community. It's
Okay,
a little different. Yeah.
understood, thank you. But the other thing is, as far as building coalitions, PACE, I don't know if you're familiar with that funding, they've got a existing case to be able to, commercial and residential, for being able to fund these things so that people can actually afford to do them, the people that don't have the funds to do
Right, right,
it.
right.
But thank you.
That's a good point too. Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick comment that when Anthony spoke, you talked about the 4 goals that San Rizal started the Green New Deal with. And those are available through your website, the greenNewDealVirginia.com.
And there's a handout here as well.
Yeah.
Because Karen, you added, now that there are 8 study groups, transportation, which was left out originally, is included. I have not found, so there's a table over here that's gonna give me.
It's right over in
all
there.
the study groups.
Yeah, no, it's, the study groups are not listed on that.
So I'm gonna encourage you, because I'm here at the meeting, and I still am not gonna walk away understanding what the 8 study groups are. And so part of the outreach and communication has to start now, because you're doing good work, but I'm having a hard time understanding the depth of it. So I encourage you to update that on your webpage and get it out to everyone who's
Okay.
kind of, thanks.
Noted, yeah, definitely.
one that
And
takes-
then Paula has the sign-up sheet in the back, so if you wanna
Take a picture.
either join the outreach and education committee, or if you want more information, just write that down, and, we can definitely get an email out to you,
Yeah.
or get you signed up into one of the 9 working groups.
And follow all of these groups on social media.
Yes, I like that.
Um,
We also have a petition, so if you have the
Yeah.
handout, at the end, when we have completed the legislative packet, and we're getting ready to present it, we're also gonna send it to the governor. And so we have a petition, and there's a tiny URL on the handout, and it's a letter to the governor, and we're asking everybody to sign on to that letter, supporting Green New Deal, asking him to support the Green New Deal, and making sure that the General Assembly in 2020 works towards the Green New Deal.
And by the way, we're gonna have the recording of this on
Yeah.
the Greater Prince William Climate Action Network page on Facebook. So it's not there. We had technical difficulties.
Yeah.
No internet, but we will have it up soon. So if you want that, and can you give us the slides or no? Is this something you can share or no? No?
I think
Okay.
you have. Yes, I can.
Okay, then we can share the slides if you're interested. Just put your name in one of the second table.
So I want to take any last burning questions, and then we were talking about how we advocate for this. I think showing the support is key, and we do so many amazing events like this, and I never get a good photo of everyone. So I would love, we have this beautiful banner up here. If the last thing we could do is have everyone actually come up and get a photo of this, and you can share with your legislators, you can share with your friends that you came here tonight and you are supportive. Are supportive of this direction for Virginia? So I would love to do that. So any last burning questions? I want to let Tiziana share anything else is coming up with Greater Prince William Climate Action Network or Mothers Out
Question
Front.
first or us first?
Anyone have any burning questions?
One thing I actually meant to say when I spoke before, this is really, really incredible to understand, which goes to what you were saying about the rural areas. But the rural areas are being depopulated by people. Your district probably has 20% fewer people than it had at the last census, maybe more than that, because the young people are leaving. So you're getting, some families with children and older people, there is no tax base. The public services are collapsing. They can't afford schools. They can't afford healthcare. They can't afford police and fire. Only this kind of economic vitalization that you were talking about can save these rural areas at all. If that's our message, we're bound to start making inroads into these areas and kind of do everything else. And if we understand that, and if they understand that we understand that, that can make a huge difference. So I just wanted to add that.
And I'll just use that as an opportunity to say one other thing to think of, because again, there is this just enormous divide between urban and rural, between self-identified environmentalists and progressives and working folks. And Alexis and I are both in the Food and Agriculture Working Group, and one of the things we're trying to figure out as part of that is it right? We think it is. And then how do we pay people who manage the land for the ecosystem services they provide? I talked about externalities, which is where you don't even pay for the real full cost. We're talking about if we want farmers and foresters and fishermen to use practices that not only produce healthy products, but that pull carbon out, put it in the ground, we need to be able to compensate them for that. And there's states that are beginning to do that. That's another way we can reach out to folks and make partners of people who right now feel like enemies by saying that we're going to help you learn how to do it if you don't already know, and we're going to compensate you a little bit for it as well. So.
Okay, thank you so much for the wonderful.